Welcome to Taipei. It is my first time in this amazing city, so join me on this POV photography video where I'll be shooting this night market. I only brought my 35mm for this night walk, so all photos are taken with this lens and an old Fuji X-T3. Being in a new place, the first photos are usually the best ones. It takes some time to get used to the vibe, warm up. Although this is a very interesting area, it's a narrow and bustling market, so that's why I went for this lens that allows me to get closer to people. I will be commenting on top of the photos I take, like this detail of this woman eating. I find details an easy way to start taking photos when I am somewhere new, where I don't know how people will react to getting photographed. I have to say I actually did the first walk around the area, checked the stalls and had dinner before taking photos, because otherwise it would be impossible with the amazing mix of smells that was there. And speaking of great smells, these skewers were very nice and made up for a great detail shot. As usual, you will be seeing everything from my point of view, so you'll see real time how I see the scene, compose, adjust the settings and shoot. Only in some cases I have cut some sections of walking and not shooting or of getting stuck in the crowd, because here it looks a bit calmer, but in some stalls there were queues and because of the narrow street it was almost impossible to move. And something that I used a lot in my photos were these eating areas that were immediately behind or next to the stalls. And in this specific case, I used the reflection on the metal structure that separated the table and captured this couple that was having some food with light in the background also reflected on the metal bar. Overall, the walk was very interesting, especially because of the novelty effect. Since I took these photos, I have had the chance to explore other Asian night markets and I have grown used to the food sold there. But here, the mix of stalls and the lights of the permanent restaurants on the right made for lots of great photos. Such as in this case, where there was this person preparing some food that I have no clue what it was, but that with the steam and the light of the stall made for a photo. And that's the last detail shot, at least for a while. At that point, I noticed that people omitted me when taking photos or they just smiled, which is usually a sign that people are okay with you being there and taking photos. So I started playing with the whole street and not just the stalls or details. This moment thought I wanted something as I had stopped there before for some food, but what I was after was this shot. It's nothing special in terms of photography, but this is also learning you make when taking photos. That not all photos taken in a short period of time are the photo of the trip. So here I moved to the area behind the stalls, where all the other restaurants and shops were, as I noticed a lot of color reflections and activity. Here I saw a nice potential shot and I waited for the right moment. Luckily, I didn't have to wait for a lot of time before this couple walked past me and I took this photo. I started feeling more comfortable, taking photos, moving around, so I started adding some people in them. I got close to the light of this specific restaurant to use it as the foreground for this other shot that showed the activity of the restaurant at peak time. I decided to go back to the market stalls, and here while I take the next photos, it can be a good moment to talk about what was for me the greatest challenge on that night: the light level differences. You can see how there are many light sources here, and how each stall have their own light and with different intensity. This made it a bit difficult if I wanted to take more general photos, which is why you will see a few more detail shots during this video, like the one I'm going to take now. I always shoot in manual mode. And it's very important to be quick adjusting the settings when I see a photo, because otherwise, in this scene that it's a market where things are moving very fast, it can be that when I am ready, the photo is not there anymore. And of course, when there are strong light sources like in this stall, it's another challenge, because even if you shoot automatic or with the aperture or shutter speed priority mode, you need to ensure you're focusing on the right place and that the highlights are not blown out. Although I'm not a fan of taking photos of people with no reason at all, here I noticed that people in the stalls were in some cases quite young, something that I'm not used to or that where I am from, it's not the normal. So I captured some scenes with the people working in them. From there, I continued walking until I found a place where I took one of my favorite photos of the night. There was this stall that I noticed I could use this transparent plastic to take a more artistic photo of the street. I wanted to show the place of the world I was and also how busy the street and the market were. And I am quite happy with the result. It's also a great way to show that not all photos need to include faces of people in order to be interesting, and it's one of these shots that I like looking for a few seconds. However, there are also moments where capturing the life of the place can be done by including faces in your photos, like here. Although I have to say I am quite mindful of privacy when taking photos. So, for example, on all my Korea trips, I make sure that no one is recognizable in my images, as it's a legal requirement there. So always check for that. Something I enjoy taking photos of, and something I've done some rules about, is lost tourists or people that, like me, stand out in that place. Here I found this woman that was checking her phone and that made for a couple great photos. Do you notice the sweets with different shapes on the right? It's a detail that I did not see until I was editing the photo. However, here I wanted to explore a bit more the scene, so I went to the back and I noticed that she was waiting for food or to order by a stall, where both her and the owner had really nice light sources, so I spent some time photographing them. First, on the more general scene with some leading lights, and second, getting a bit closer and photographing only the stall and the owner. And then, all of a sudden, all things started happening. I turned around and there was this scooter with a very easy to frame background, and after that and walking a few steps, I noticed this woman waiting for her order with the view from the back of the stall that was a bit unusual and that I wanted to take. And that's how I made it to the end of the market. Only around 300 meters, but a walk that took me 10 or 15 minutes. However, I decided to come back to the start. And I have to say, the photos here turned even better. Starting by this car that felt like came from the market itself, but actually it was a side alley. Thus, I walked back to the market, and as you will notice, I changed a bit my strategy. The stimuli overload was starting to fade, and I was feeling more comfortable, which is something I don't hear a lot of people talking about, but I think it's very important in travel photography. And to prove that, at this stall that I had previously seen, the owner started talking to me and I asked him for the photo and he said yes. That's also a great example of what I mentioned before of very different light sources in one same place. He is well exposed, but the lower part of the scene is blown out. Yet I still look for some details, like in this spot. But as in the previous ones, I tried to include a bit of movement, in this case showing the skills of the people working. And with that, I went back to the other row of stalls and shops, when I saw this car that I have no clue how I had missed before. Yet I took two different photos of it. And something that amazes me is how when I am taking photos, I still miss interesting or relevant details. In this case, there's this traffic light in the garage wall that I guess it was used to control access to the garage, and that now, looking at it, I should have photographed. There was another thing that surprised me from this food market, and it was the amount of foreign food stalls, like this one that was serving German food, and with these two people sitting behind it, I decided to capture. And then, after taking this photo, I saw another version of the food cart that I took before, with the nice characters on the LED screen. And again, after turning around, another photo opportunity happened. In this case, this woman that was washing the dishes just behind the stall. If you noticed, I ended up taking more photos of the activity behind the market than on the market itself. Most likely because it was easier to isolate the subjects. The market itself was so crowded that it was difficult to take good pictures of it. Also because sometimes people want to be nice and stop walking, like for example here where some people saw me taking a photo and stopped, wait for me to take it, but actually I just wanted to show the natural flow of movement. But if there's something I love about these markets, is the unexpected things you can find in them. I have taken very different photos through my trips, but there's always some room for being surprised. And in this case, the surprise was this dog that had its own spot and was chill as a cucumber, and that of course I had to photograph. Here I noticed that I still hadn't explored the other back of the market, so the small path behind the stalls, not in the direction of the shops, but on the other side. And although I was not expecting much from it, I could take some really nice photos. The first one being this one, of these two women that were chatting on the stall. I am a bit of a composition freak, that always attempts for the perfect composition, and in this market I learned that sometimes there are not such thing as that, and that it's okay to include some noise in your photos. Here, however, I was patient enough to wait for the right moment. I noticed some women ordering food, and the light was perfect, as there wasn't much and illuminated their faces perfectly. After a few seconds, I could take this photo. With the details of the faucets on the foreground, it is one of my favorite photos of the night. It is weird how whenever I am taking photos on the street, the best ones tend to come at the end of the session. I can think of 3 reasons why it is like that. First, because in this case, I started taking less crowded paths, which made composition a bit easier, like for example here, with this very unique outfit. Second, because as the time went on, some stalls started closing, making it easier to take photos, because there were fewer light sources and of course fewer people. And third, and that's the most obvious one, because I got warmed up. It is amazing how, just like practicing any sport, you need to warm up a bit to take photos. In this case, for example, I would not have seen this composition at the start of this video. But this woman was perfectly placed both for the vertical version of the photo and the horizontal one. I ended up taking both of them, and as you will see, the edits are a bit different, but I like them both. And as I was reaching the end of the market and getting closer to the main avenue, I still had time for 2 extra photos. The first one is one of these cases where I did not expose the image correctly, as all the highlights are drawn out, but it's this man taking a seat before going back to work. And while we reach the final image, and before you see it, and if you like this video and want to see more travel photography and POV content, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Oh, and by the way, this is the final photo.